characters, two universes, one hidden connection. Neither was chosen to be the hero, yet both changed the fate of their worlds. If you grew up in the 80s and 90s, Dragon Ball Z and ThunderCats are burned into your memory. Monday through Friday, right after school, you'd flip on that TV and two characters always stood out. Not the heroes, the strategists. What if Piccolo and Panthro were never really sidekicks at all? What if one of them was actually created to end an entire franchise? Akira Toriyama never meant for Dragon Ball Z to run as long as it did. The anime gave us the basics. Goku trains, Goku fights, Goku wins. But buried in the creative history behind the series was a much messier story. A story about a creator fighting his own publisher for the right to end what he'd started. In February 2025, three of Dragon Ball's original editors, Kazuhiko Torishima, Yu Kondo, and Fuyuto Takeda, confirmed publicly what fans had suspected for years. Toriyama's planned ending for Dragon Ball Z was the Cell Saga, not the Buu Saga. The story was built to end with Gohan defeating Cell. Toriyama fought for that ending. Shueisha pushed back. Fan pressure was overwhelming, and Toriyama, worn down after 15 straight years of weekly deadlines, was forced to keep going into the Buu Saga, an arc he never planned to write. Which brings us back to the question: if the Cell Saga was the intended ending, what role did Piccolo play in it? Everything. Piccolo was the strategic architect of that ending. While Goku trained inside the hyperbolic time chamber, it was Piccolo who made the first calculated move against the androids. It was Piccolo who fused with Kami, giving up his separate existence to gain the power he needed to face the threat. And it was Piccolo who trained Gohan, the character Toriyama intended to carry the series through its final chapter. Every major piece of the ending Toriyama fought for ran through Piccolo. Now, Panthro. In the ThunderCats universe, Lion-O carried the Sword of Omens. A prophecy was written around him before he was even born. Destiny already had his name on it. Panthro had none of that. No prophecy. No mystical weapon chosen for him. No legend waiting to unfold. What Panthro had was a wrench, a blueprint, and a mind that never stopped calculating. He was the engineer behind the Thunder Tank, the most powerful vehicle in the ThunderCats' arsenal. Built with his own hands, he designed the defense systems for Cat's Lair. He was the one keeping the entire survival infrastructure running, while everybody else was out fighting. When Lion-O reacted with emotion, Panthro had already calculated the contingency. When the team pushed forward, Panthro had already built the way out. Lion-O got the title, he got the mythology, he got the Sword of Omens glowing in the dark. Panthro woke up at dawn and made sure the Thunder Tank had fuel. They weren't remembered for being chosen. They were remembered because everybody always needed them. Back to Piccolo, because the most important thing about him isn't his power. It's the moment he decided to stop being a villain. Toriyama's first editor, Kazuhiko Torishima, has said that before King Piccolo, almost every villain in Dragon Ball was too likable. The series needed a real villain, a character with no redeeming softness, no charm, no warmth. To help Toriyama land on that character, Torishima pointed him toward historical figures defined by pure cruelty, including the Roman Emperor Nero, known for treating other people's suffering as entertainment. That research is what produced King Piccolo, and later, his reincarnation, Piccolo Jr. On the surface, the final opponent of the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament. Underneath, Toriyama's most complete attempt at building a mind that couldn't just be overpowered by force. Cold intelligence, calculating silence, a character designed to demand not just strength to beat him, but a plan. And that's where Toriyama made the decision that changed everything. He turned that mind into a mentor. The moment Piccolo stepped in front of an attack meant for Gohan, protecting a kid he owed absolutely nothing, Dragon Ball Z introduced something the anime never fully dug into. Piccolo wasn't just fighting, he was investing in an outcome. Planning for a future he wasn't even sure he'd survive to see. Because here's what the series glossed right over. Piccolo didn't need to protect Gohan. There was no strategic upside in it, no calculated payoff. A being built entirely out of logic, engineered for destruction, choosing in a single unplanned moment to put a child's life above his own. The anime played it as an emotional beat. What it actually was the most strategically complex decision in the entire Dragon Ball Z saga. A weapon choosing to become a shield, not because it was ordered to, because it calculated that the future demanded it. There's one moment that proves this better than any other. During Dragon Ball Z's very first battle against Raditz, Piccolo was already charging his most powerful technique, the special beam cannon. When Raditz sliced his arm off mid-charge, Piccolo simply regenerated it and kept going. Never broke concentration, never abandoned the plan. While everyone else was reacting, Piccolo was executing. And Panthro operated the exact same way. Physically, the strongest ThunderCat, but brute strength was never really his job. There isn't a single scene where Panthro charges blindly into a fight he hasn't already read. He fights the way an engineer solves a problem. Assess the variables, find the weak point, execute. In a universe full of characters driven by honor, destiny, and raw emotion, Panthro was driven by results. That distinction mattered more than the show ever gave it credit for. In a war for survival against Mum-Ra, against threats that were supposed to be impossible to overcome, it was Panthro who made sure the team had a vehicle fast enough to escape, walls strong enough to hold, and systems working well enough to fight again the next day. He didn't just win battles, he made it possible to keep fighting at all. But here's where things get strange. The studio that animated every frame of Panthro had a secret, one that traces directly back to the same institution that built Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z was produced by Toei Animation, established in 1956, with roots tracing back to Japan's very first animation studio, founded in 1948, a company Western animation insiders often call the Japanese Disney, the institution that defined the visual language of Japanese animation for generations. Every frame of Piccolo, every cold stare across the battlefield, every calculated movement, drawn by Toei animators working in Tokyo. ThunderCats was an American concept, created by Tobin Wolfe, produced by Rankin Bass out of New York, but nobody in New York could animate it at the level they needed. So Rankin Bass went to Japan. The studio they hired was Pacific Animation Corporation, a Tokyo-based studio founded by former Toei Animation staff. The same Toei Animation that made Dragon Ball Z. Every fight sequence Panthro ever had, every Thunder Tank scene, every frame of that dark, powerful warrior set against the night sky of Third Earth. All of it drawn by Japanese animators working in studios whose creative DNA traced straight back to the same foundational institution that built Dragon Ball Z. After school, American kids were watching two characters built on opposite ends of the very same industry, and they never knew it. But the connection goes deeper than a studio address. It reaches into what these two characters were actually designed to represent, and what their stories did with them instead. Piccolo was created to end Dragon Ball, a final villain, a character built to close out a story, not stretch it out. The publisher said no, and Piccolo, the character designed to destroy the franchise, became the one who held it together from the inside. Panthro never carried a title. No legend was ever written around him. In a story built on inherited power and chosen destinies, Panthro was simply the one who showed up and made everything work. Think about what that actually means. Both universes built elaborate mythologies around chosen heroes, bloodlines, prophecies, cosmic weapons passed down through generations. And then, quietly, with no announcement, they handed the real survival of both stories to the characters who had none of that. The ones who planned, the ones who built, the ones who never needed destiny because they'd already decided what they were going to do. The shows told us Piccolo and Panthro were fighters, but what nobody tells you about either character is that they were the only ones, in their respective universes, who actually understood that surviving a battle isn't the same as winning a war. They weren't chosen, they weren't destined, they just never got it wrong when it counted. And maybe that's exactly why, decades later, they're the ones we remember most. If this video made you look at two characters you thought you already knew in a completely different light, share it with someone who grew up watching Dragon Ball Z or ThunderCats. And if you want to know the dark origin of another classic character TV never told you about, subscribe to the channel, because the next video is about a character who looked harmless but had a seriously disturbing past. See you then!